Still with me in studio to discuss the role of social CRM within business is James McLaren, the Senior Manager at Accenture, Karen Valle, General Manager of Mini SA, as well as the Digital Marketing Strategist, Yoav Techelet. Karen, before the break we were talking about operationally how marketing functions are changing because of social media, and you were saying you don't influence the conversation as Mini, but you track the conversation. Now, in 10 minutes on Twitter, that will be tracking 3,000–4,000 voices. Whose job is it to track those people?
It's probably an impossible job for one individual to sit there and do that on an ongoing basis. However, as a brand, you have to listen to the conversation that's taking place. So you can't really outsource it to somebody else and say, well, you take control of our brand. It still is our responsibility. So it does change the nature of how we actually structure our departments, our marketing departments, to monitor and listen out for the conversations that are taking place amongst the communities.
James, operationally, how does the face of business and the marketing department, how does it change? Issues like customer services, for instance, call centers.
Well, what we've seen a lot of our clients do is establish these forums, these social platforms where they can converse with each other, and in effect what that means is a lot of the sort of tier 1, tier 2 service issues that might have ordinarily been routed to a call center to be addressed. These are fairly simple issues that take a couple of minutes to resolve, maximum. Those issues tend to be resolved within these forums with clients interacting with each other directly. And that means that organizations can free up resources that would have been tied up in those call centers to look at more sophisticated ways to tap into social media platforms for the insights and the benefit they provide.
And normally, sorry to interject, Lerato, it's normally immediate. That response from the community is actually sometimes more efficient than looking inside their own organization.
It takes us back to what we were talking about earlier on. How do I trust that information? My cell phone's broken, what must I do? And somebody says, oh, just recharge it, for lack of a better example. How do I know that's coming from cell phone operator?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've also seen with some big brands that have done this really successfully on the internet is being able to harness a community of people, but also using things like Twitter for that first line of customer service. But with the community, a lot of the brands that are using it successfully are allowing their brand ambassadors and other users to come and answer questions and give their experiences, but with the brand almost acting as a big brother in terms of moderation. So the brand can actually watch what's happening in terms of the conversation, and if a user gives an answer to a product query or a question or something that may be wrong, that might not really fit within the guidelines of the brand or the company, that company has the ability to then step in and say, this information might not be 100% correct, or yes, this information is great, that's perfect. But I think the key here is to really act in a supporting role in social media, and especially from that customer service environment where you're allowing other users to get involved, almost from a brand ambassador level where they are answering other consumers and other users of the products or services.
Karen, has it affected the costs of how marketing departments operate, for instance, because it's the first point of contact, many people say, the social site between the brand or the company and the user, so you're able to create early warning systems. Does that mean that there's a whole system or a network within the Mini SA operation that's now redundant because of this?
We've always operated on a very small basis in any case, so it's not like we have had extra ability to change that necessarily. But how it has changed, certainly in terms of marketing costs, would be it's a lot cheaper to communicate on the social networks than it is to do our traditional form of marketing. And for many as a brand, it certainly has made a lot more sense because it does spread that much further and certainly helps to work within our marketing resources.
Any one of the gentlemen can take this one. It's a lot cheaper to market and advertise, and I think cheap being the operative term here. Can you afford not to be using social CRM at this stage?
I personally don't think so. I think it has to form an integral part of any marketing or communications plan in any brand. Whether it pays to go the whole hog, so to speak, in Facebook and Twitter, that really depended on the brand and what's happening from a consumer behavior perspective relative to that brand. But again, also when people say it's cheap to a point. The whole thing is ultimately you want to be able to close that loop in social marketing as well and get that one point of view or that 360-degree perspective on that particular customer. Right. So that's about bringing all that information and data back into one place that you can make sense of it. Just like in traditional CRM, we now have the ability to do all of that in a social space and bring all that into one place and to be able to actually act on that data.
Yeah, I think the point that I'd build on that is the quality of the data is a key issue to focus on with social CRM platforms. If you just focus on Facebook in particular, I mean, it ticked over the 500 million users a couple of weeks back. And when you survey the data that's actually contained within Facebook and you assess it against a quality criterion in terms of how accurate is that depicting me as an individual or some other customer, it is by far a much more accurate repository of data. And that in itself, I think, proves the value to organizations like Mini and any other customers who want to know who they're marketing to. Right. So, on a platform like Facebook, you have, data, you have media, you have connections, and you have influence. So that's a set of data that is previously sort of unheard of in terms of getting access to from a marketing perspective.
Just building on what you've said and what Yoav has said, it's very good to pool this information almost as research that you can use as a repository of knowledge and then utilize it to innovate, etc. Does this mean the role of the retail space has changed? And I'm going to explain to you. If I want to buy a new perfume, I get the assault on my senses when I walk into a department store and the ladies want to spray on a bit and take this and here's a promotion, 50% off, etc. I see a couple of lovely sensual ads on television and then I buy it. I don't think the social site is going to give me the same kind of experience. But it would help you discern whether or not, given my income bracket and where I'm living, I would want to use that perfume.
So let's and I like your example. Let's pick something similar, like wine. It's also a very tactile experience. And if you look at wine producers around the world, you see a clear split. So if you speak to some wine producers in France, they absolutely shun social media. There are very few people who have Facebook pages or Twitter profiles or anything of that nature. You look at some of the Australian and New Zealand and the Californian producers, and they're doing something slightly different. Clearly, you can't impart the taste of a wine in the same way as you can't impart, the aroma of a perfume via your social media platform, but you can gather very valuable information about what people think once they have bought it or tasted it or experienced whatever that product is. So I think, it depends on the sort of history of the client, their own sort of DNA and makeup as to whether they'll be, inclined to use a social media platform. But if they intend to, I think there's value to be derived from it for sure.
All right, just some stats. Since 70% of consumers in the West have access to social sites, 77% consider the importance of blogs for information. Again, when you look at these stats, why should I come to a showroom? You can tell me everything I want to know on YouTube.
You still want to test drive that car, and you're not going to do that on the social network. They can explain the experience to you and tell you what a thrilling drive they had, for example, but you still need to actually experience it for yourself before you can make the ultimate decision. So you can go through all those processes of getting the awareness, gaining the interest and the consideration, but ultimately you still have to come into the showroom to get the actual physical experience.
And let's just talk about age and demographics here. Some people would argue that users of social sites tend to be under 45, for instance, the youth. and maybe old friends trying to catch up. But people who are seriously moneyed, to use a colloquial term, who are more mature and discerning, are not going to go to Facebook to get information about a product.
Well, I think we're seeing interesting trends and stats around the social networks. Facebook, it's quite evenly spread across demographics, age groups, etc. But just to look at something like Twitter, I think just the other day, the oldest Twitter user passed away, and I think she was about 194 years old, and she was an active Twitter user. Now, a lot of people, when they think of social networks, think of just Facebook, but you have very big social networks like LinkedIn, which are probably the primary business social network, which are really made up of professional people, very high LSM, educated people. So I think we have to put it in context, the social networks, and something like LinkedIn is often overlooked. So it's really about who you want to talk to, how you want to talk to them, and when you want to talk to them.
Yeah, we'll leave it there. Thank you everybody so much for just talking me through this issue of going past the buzz on Twitter and Facebook and blogger sites and YouTube, and really making it effective in terms of the returns on investment. I'd like to thank James McLaren from Accenture, Karen Valle from Mini SA, and Yoav Tekeleth from who's a digital marketing strategist. I'd like to thank you at home for watching this edition of Africa's Boardroom.